In the high-walled estates of Ikoyi, there is a saying, gold can hide 1,000 sins, but it cannot hide a lie that breathes. For 3 years, Zara Okojie was the barren daughter-in-law. She was the woman who drank bitter herbs at midnight and endured the silent stabs of a mother-in-law's judgment. She was the broken soil that couldn't hold a seed. But tonight, at the Golden Boy's 35th birthday party, the music hasn't just stopped, it has died. Look at Xavier Okojie. Look at the CEO of the year, his face turning the color of ash, as his own mother reads a document from a clinic in London, a document dated before the wedding. Zara isn't crying tonight. She is standing at the head of the table, in emerald silk, looking at the man she once called her world. Mother. Zara's voice cuts through the humid Lagos night like a razor. You spent 3 years blaming the soil, but you never realized the gardener was sterile. Tonight, the Okojie Empire isn't just shaking, it's burning. This is not a story about a broken marriage. This is a story about a calculated execution. This is the weight of gold. If you're ready for a story where the secrets are as expensive as the jewelry, you're in the right place. We're about to deconstruct the fall of the Okojie Empire, minute by minute. Subscribe now if you believe that the truth is worth more than gold. You don't want to miss how this masterpiece ends. Now, let's go back to the night the honey turned to gall. They say that in Lagos, silence is a luxury only the rich can afford. But for Zara Okojie, silence was not a luxury. It was a prison. Look at the map of Victoria Island. See the glittering towers that touch the clouds. People look up at those windows and dream of the lives inside. They see the gold-plated faucets and the Italian marble. They don't see the tears that fall on that marble. How they leave no stain. How they are wiped away by silent maids before the sun sets. Before we talk about the end, we must talk about the beginning. Because before Zara was the barren wife, she was the miracle. 3 years ago, the Okojie wedding was not just a ceremony. It was a merger. Xavier Okojie, the golden son of fintech, and Zara, the girl with the laugh that could brighten the dark corners of Broad Street. Xavier didn't always have eyes of stone. There was a time, let's call it the season of honey, when he would watch Zara sleep and wonder how he got so lucky. He would hold her hand under the table at restaurants, tracing her knuckles with his thumb. Back then, Mrs. Violet Okojie didn't look at Zara's womb. She looked at her smile. She would tell her friends at the bridge club, "My son has finally found his match. She is fertile ground for our family's future." Imagine them on their honeymoon in the Maldives. The water was the color of Zara's dreams. Xavier promised her the world. He told her, "Anything you want, Zara, just name it." She didn't ask for diamonds. She didn't ask for the penthouse. She just asked for his heart. She didn't know his heart was already guarded by a secret that had been signed and sealed in a London clinic months before he ever said "I do." But sweetness in a bottle eventually runs dry. The first year passed. The celebration faded. The wedding gifts were put away. And then, the silence began to grow. Not the peaceful silence of a happy home, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a house, waiting for a sound that wouldn't come. The sound of a baby's cry. There is a specific kind of cold that exists only in a Lagos mansion, when the AC is set too low, and the hearts are set even lower. By the 14th month of the marriage, the golden season hadn't just ended, it had been erased. The yellow roses Xavier used to bring? They were replaced by folders. Business proposals, late-night Zoom calls with investors in Singapore and San Francisco. Xavier started coming home after Zara was already in bed, his scent smelling of expensive cognac and the sweat of a man running away from his own shadow. But it wasn't just the husband who was changing, it was the matriarch. Mrs. Violet Okojie didn't stop visiting the penthouse. Oh no, she visited more often. But she no longer brought gifts from her trips to Paris. She brought solutions. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Zara is sitting in the living room, staring at the Atlantic, which looks like a sheet of grey lead. Mrs. Violet walks in, not with a hug, but with a plastic container wrapped in foil. "Drink this, Zara," she says, her voice as sharp as a tailor's scissors. "It's from a woman in the village, a specialist. She says it cleanses the system." Zara looks at the liquid. It's dark, bitter, and smells of roots and desperation. She looks at her mother-in-law, searching for the woman who once called her daughter. She finds nothing but a cold, calculating gaze. To Violet, Zara was no longer a person. She was a piece of machinery that refused to start. A faulty investment. For 6 months, Zara drank the bitters. She endured the cleansing rituals. She sat through the prayer meetings where ants laid hands on her stomach and shouted at demons. They claimed they were blocking her fruitfulness. And where was Xavier? He was always in the next room. He was always on a call. He would watch his mother humiliate his wife. He would watch Zara's skin turn sallow from the herbal concoctions. And he would say, "Nothing." This is the psychological depth of the Okojie house. Xavier wasn't just a liar. He was a spectator to his wife's slow destruction. He knew the demons weren't in Zara's womb. He knew the cleansing wouldn't work. But every time his mother blamed Zara, it was the day the world didn't look at him. Every tear Zara shed was a shield for his ego. He was a coward who traded his wife's sanity for his own reputation. If the penthouse was a prison, the monthly brunch at the Ikoyi estate was the execution dock. In Lagos high society, you don't fight with fists, you fight with adjectives, you fight with the way you pour tea. At the 2-year mark, the brunch had become a performance. All the cousins were there, the who's who of the family. They would talk about the stock market, the new refinery, the property in Lekki, and then, like a scripted play, the conversation would pivot. Xavier, darling, Mrs. Violet would say, loud enough for the staff to hear. I saw the Alakija grandson yesterday. Such a bouncy baby boy. It's a pity some houses remain so quiet, while others are full of life. The table would go silent. A silence so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. Zara would look at her plate. She would see the reflection of her own face in the silver spoon, small and broken. She would look at Xavier, her eyes pleading. Say something. Tell them we are trying. Tell them to stop. But Xavier would just pick up his napkin, dab the corner of his mouth, and ask for more espresso. In that moment, the golden boy was the coldest thing in the room. He didn't just abandon her, he erased her. He allowed the narrative that Zara was the problem to become the family gospel. He let her become the villain of the story so he could remain the tragic hero. There is a moment in every tragedy where the victim decides she is no longer willing to die in the dark. For Zara, that moment came on a Monday morning, a day so ordinary, it felt like a trap. She didn't take the Okojie SUV. She didn't call the driver who reported her every move to Mrs. Violet. She took an unmarked taxi, a nondescript car that smelled of cheap air freshener and old secrets. She was heading to Victoria Island, to a clinic that didn't have the Okojie name on the donor wall. Imagine her in the waiting room, a woman surrounded by gold, but feeling like a ghost. She watched other couples holding hands, real couples, terrified but together. She sat alone. When the doctor called her in, Zara expected a verdict. She expected the doctor to confirm what the family had been whispering for years. Faulty, broken, empty. But the truth, as it often does, arrived like a lightning bolt in a clear sky. The doctor didn't look at her with pity. She looked at her with confusion. Mrs. Okojie, she said, your labs are pristine. Your hormone levels are a textbook example of health. There is absolutely no biological reason why you shouldn't be a mother. The silence that followed wasn't the heavy silence of the Ikoyi brunch. It was the sharp, ringing silence of a bomb that had just gone off. Zara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She felt a cold, crystalline clarity wash over her. If she wasn't the hole in the family, then who was? And more importantly, why had he let her bleed for 3 years? That night, the penthouse felt different. It was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. Zara waited. She waited for Xavier to finish his 3rd glass of scotch. She waited for the rhythmic, arrogant snoring of a man who thought he had successfully buried the truth. She entered his home office. The air smelled of expensive leather and deception. She didn't look for a diary. She looked for the data. Xavier was a man of fin. His life was built on code. She spent hours, 4, 5, 6, navigating his encrypted drives. And then, she saw it. A folder hidden deep within, a directory labeled Property Deeds, 2021. Inside was a PDF. A medical file from a private facility in Marylebone, London, dated 6 months before their engagement. Diagnosis, azoospermia, total absence of sperm. Zara sat in the dark, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in her eyes. She read the emails. She saw how Xavier had consulted specialists on how to manage the situation. Not how to fix it, but how to hide it. He had known before he ever asked for a hand. He had watched her drink those bitter herbs. He had watched his mother spit on her dignity. He had watched Zara break into 1,000 pieces every month when her cycle arrived. And he had consoled her all, while knowing he was the reason. He hadn't married a wife. He had hired a scapegoat. Xavier's 35th birthday was a spectacle of vanity. The lawn of the Ikoyi estate was transformed into a wonderland of emerald and gold. The elite of Lagos were there. The oil barons, the tech moguls, the gossip columnists. Zara stood amongst them, wearing a silk gown that moved like liquid fire. She looked perfect. She looked like the jewel they all expected her to be. But inside, she was a storm. Mrs. Violet rose to give the toast. She looked at Zara with that familiar, patronizing smirk. To my son, she began. May this be the year the Okojie legacy finally finds its fruit. But before the cheers could leave their lips, Zara rose. The music didn't stop immediately. It faded, like a dying heartbeat. I'd like to add to that toast, Zara said. Her voice wasn't shaky. It was a blade. She walked to the head of the table. She didn't look at the guests. She looked at Xavier. He looked up at her, a flicker of genuine fear finally breaking through his mask of arrogance. We've spent 3 years talking about my failures, she told the silent crowd. We spent 3 years wondering why the soil was dry. But it turns out, the soil was always fine. It was the gardener who was a fraud. She took the London file, the original, with the London clinic's seal, and she didn't just give it to him. She laid it in front of Mrs. Violet. Read it, mother. Read how your golden boy lied to you. Read how he watched you humiliate me to protect his own pathetic pride. He didn't want an heir, he wanted a shield. And today, I am dropping the shield. The fallout wasn't her concern. She didn't stay to see Xavier's face turn gray. She didn't stay to hear Mrs. Violet's screams of realization. Zara walked. She walked past the security guards, past the luxury cars, past the life she had been told was everything. As her car pulled away from the gates of the Ikoyi estate, the narrator, the voice of the city itself, reminds us of one thing. In Lagos, you can buy gold, you can buy silence, and you can buy a legacy, but you cannot buy the soul of a woman who has finally realized she was never the problem. Zara looked at the Atlantic. The sun was beginning to rise, turning the water into a sheet of hammered gold. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't trapped in the cage. She was the one who held the key. The weight of gold was gone. Zara was, at last, a masterpiece. Zara didn't just walk out of the gate. She walked into the light of a new day, armed with the one thing the Okojies couldn't bribe, the truth. By 9 a.m. the following morning, while the birthday champagne was still sour in Xavier's throat, the first strike was delivered. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a tearful text. It was a thick, manila envelope served by a court bailiff at the gates of the Okojie penthouse. Petition for divorce, grounded in irretrievable breakdown and willful deceit. Zara didn't ask for a settlement. She didn't ask for the cars or the penthouse. She asked for her life back. But in the corridors of power, a divorce isn't just a private matter. It's a crack in the foundation of an empire. When the news hit the boardrooms of Marina and the salons of Lekki, the Okojie stock didn't just dip, shuddered. The golden couple was a lie, and the city was hungry for every detail. Mrs. Violet Okojie was a woman who lived for the image. To her, a sterile son was a tragedy, but a publicly shamed son was a death sentence. The panic didn't start with sadness. It started with damage control. Imagine her in her study, surrounded by portraits of ancestors who seemed to be judging her. She tried to call the editors of the major papers. She tried to buy the silence of the guests who had been at the party. But the digital age is a cruel master. The video of Zara's gift at the dinner table was already moving through WhatsApp groups like a wildfire in a dry season. Then, the tone changed. The arrogance broke. Mrs. Violet, the woman who had forced Zara to drink bitter herbs, now found herself drinking the gall of her own making. She began to send ants who had once laid hands on Zara's womb to cast out demons, were now sent to Zara's hidden hotel room with baskets of fruit and expensive lace. Zara, my daughter, they would plead through the door. Think of the family. Think of the legacy. Xavier is a man. He made a mistake of pride. Forgive him. We can fix this quietly. We can fly you both to America. We can find a way. And then there was Xavier. Without the shield of his mother's protection, he was just a man in a very large, very empty apartment. He didn't come with anger. He came with the desperation of a man who had realized that his golden status was entirely dependent on the woman he had tried to destroy. He began to flood Zara's phone with messages. I was scared, Zara. I didn't want to lose you. I'll do anything. I'll go public myself. Just come back. He even showed up at her gate, the CEO of a multi-million naira firm, standing in the Lagos rain, begging a security guard to let him speak to his wife. He offered her more gold, more houses, more jewelry. He tried to buy her back with the very things that had made her feel like a prisoner. He didn't understand that Zara didn't want his gold. She had found her own. The Okojies thought that if they begged long enough, if they offered enough money, the problem would go away. They didn't realize that Zara wasn't a problem to be solved anymore. She was a woman who had been born again in the fire of their betrayal. The day the divorce was finalized, there were no cameras, no gala, no champagne. Just Zara, walking out of the courtroom, in a simple white suit. Xavier sat on the benches, his head in his hands. His mother was nowhere to be found. Her embarrassment had finally driven her into hiding in her country estate. The Okojie name remained, but the weight was gone. Zara looked at the sky. It wasn't the hammered gold of the Ikoyi penthouse. It was a clear, open blue. She didn't need a legacy built on lies. She was going to build her own. As the car pulled away, the narrator's voice leaves us with a final thought. In the end, gold is just metal. It is heavy, it is cold, and it can be melted down. But a woman's spirit, that is the only thing truly worth its weight. The gates of the Okojie estate have closed, and the dust has settled on a legacy built on sand. Zara has walked into her new morning. But in the streets of Lagos, the conversation is only just beginning. In a world where image is everything and silence is bought with gold, was Zara right to burn the house down to find her light? Or is the weight of family loyalty worth more than a single woman's truth? The court of public opinion is now in session, and your voice is the final witness. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you know a Zara? Or have you seen the shadow of a Xavier lurking behind a golden mask? We want to hear your stories. If this journey moved you, if you felt the heat of that Ikoyi sun, and the cold of that obsidian table, subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Join our circle as we continue to peel back the layers of the most scandalous, heartbreaking, and triumphant stories hidden in the heart of the city. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we reveal the soul. Subscribe, comment, and remember, not everything that glitters is gold.